Hey everybody, I'm very tired, so this probably isn't going to be a great explanation. But somebody asked me why, well, not somebody, many somebodies have asked why do token bridges need admin keys? Um, for context, for anyone just coming in, there's a lot of interest in having the ability to lock up your coins, either native token or some token spec like ERC20, lock them up on Ethereum, and then have a representation on some other blockchain, sidechain, L2, um, so that you can manipulate them there. Where in theory, the fees to do transactions are much lower, or it's much faster, or you get finality, or other products that rely on higher throughput. And if you can uh, transact and operate with a representation, or think of it like a hologram or something. It's a projection into another network or into another domain, and it acts and moves and can be transacted with normally. And then when all is said and done, whoever's holding it at the end gets to cash it out for the real thing on the original network. It's the idea of a bridge. Why does something like that need admin keys? I think this came up because we're looking to do this for Pulse Chain as close to out of the gate as possible. Um, we all have a strong bias towards trustless systems that don't require an administrator or anybody taking control of your tokens just to project them into another space. But I think Richard recently said publicly um, that there's no such thing. Like we might have to do um, out of the gate something with keys. So why is that? Why do we need that? Why is that required? Why are there no solutions that don't have that? Um, so I want to explain that a little bit because I think it's actually this is a little bit of a difficult intuition to get. So what are we trying to do? I want to take some action on the blockchain. I want to put my tokens somewhere to mark them and say, I want these to be projected into another space. So in theory, there's a special address or there's a special flag or there's a special something. You mark them or deposit them, and that will get written to the blockchain as a transaction. You're writing data saying this is my intent. It'll be in the blockchain now forever. So can't we just wait some number of confirmation blocks where a fork becomes extremely unlikely, so we don't have the double spend issue? So if I wait 20 minutes, with proof of work chains, there's some block depth that's considered safe or statistically negligible that someone else is going to come along and say, aha, but I have a longer blockchain with all the same weight, all the same proof of work. I think for Bitcoin, the standard is like 6 blocks. So like after an hour, it's extremely unlikely anyone's going to come in and have processed more blocks at the same difficulty in an hour. So that's considered safe, statistically safe. And Ethereum has some threshold as well. Their blocks are faster. They're more permissive of reorganizing the blockchain, so that depth is much deeper. It's wall clock time, it's not as long, but block depth is much deeper. So can't we just wait that whatever that depth is, and then on the other chain say it's safe to mint coins, and then you're done. And then you can do the reverse. On the other chain, there will be some depth after which it's statistically safe. And so you burn or otherwise annihilate the holograms, and then you wait. And then on the original chain, you see that and say, oh, okay, I'm safe to unlock or transfer that amount of value. if you think of it like a casino, I think this is a great analogy that somebody used. Like a casino where you bring cash, you give cash, you get chips. In the casino, chips are like cash. You can tip with them, you can buy food with them, you gamble with them, play games. And when you're done, however many you have left, you take to the cage and exchange for cash. And in that case, the block depth or finality is instant because they can verify all the chips in real time, that you haven't tried to pawn fraudulent chips. And they give you the money and you leave. So why don't we have that? The issue is hidden away in the little moment when you have to prove in another blockchain that something happened on the first blockchain and vice versa. So can't you just prove it? How do you prove it? How does that work? Well, the blockchain, we'll use Ethereum as the example. When it produces blocks, it has a chunk of data called the headers. And the headers give you everything you need to create a proof that something happened. So it gives you all of the state roots, and you can do like transaction proving or log proving or transaction logs, or state. So you can actually prove that a contract was in a state, a particular state at a particular block height. So it gives you all these tools because it has to, because every node has to be able to provably move from one block to the next, from one state to the next. That's the only way that these decentralized systems actually work, is if you have all the information in hand to prove any particular fact about how you got from A to B to C to D. It has to work that way. But that is not exportable to other systems without that system also going through the process and participating in the original system. So if you're trying to go from Ethereum to BSC, BSC, even with very similar, if not identical, code for processing those blocks, doesn't have the full map of how you got from A to B to C to D to E. So if I'm trying to prove that something happened in block C, I have to somehow get BSC to know about A and B that preceded it. And how does it know that I'm not lying about A and B and C? So it has to establish the trustworthiness of any information that I give it. So the easiest way to do this is to just have trusted data buses. So these are the admin keys. A service that has a key that is well known and trusted to shuttle this data between chains. This is the most straightforward solution. And you can gussy it up any way you like. You can say it's actually a multi-part key that accesses funds versus just a data shuttling key that has some public persona behind it or whatever. That is the same thing. That is what we're talking about. Trusted parties that use a client for both blockchains to observe the events coming out of them, wait that length, and then they're authorized to do something on a contract on the other chain, mint coins, destroy coins, whatever. And similarly, they have a client that's watching the other chain, pulling events, noticing burns or annihilations, and transmitting that in a trusted way to the native chain, whatever it is. So that's one way. So the other thing that you could be thinking, or you could have noticed, is I said that the blockchain gives you all the data you need to prove any particular fact. So there are schemes that go this way and that talk about, oh, okay, so here's what we need. If we could just, like, you don't need to fully validate the blockchain. If you just have those headers with all of the data you need to then prove any particular fact, That's smaller. You don't need to actually fully validate the blockchain if you can just use those things to construct sort of a light version of the blockchain, of a foreign blockchain on your network. So if there's, say, a contract on BSC that has all of the Ethereum headers in order, you could then ask an Ethereum node, hey, I want a proof for some fact, or that this transaction took place in this block, because that's what it looks like on Etherscan to me. It happened 2 days ago, so it's well beyond the depth that's required to be final. Give me those proofs. And it'll give you these big chunks of data that you then should, in theory, be able to submit to this BSC contract, and it can chew through and say, okay, here's the block, here are the different state roots, and with your proof, they zip up to the correct value, so that looks legit, and then these zip up to the correct value, so that looks legit. Okay, good to go, stamp, stamp. But who is trusted to publish the headers? So you actually don't get around the problem. You've just moved it or pushed it lower. So this pattern is called light clients. You can Google this, so a light client for ETH or for any of these EVM chains. Basically are the same thing. It's a string of these contiguous block headers. And unfortunately, you still have to know who's publishing them, who has the right to publish them. What if there's a chain reorg? Do you only publish after you've hit the depth? Like, there's no protocol for this. So again, you have a trusted party of some sort that can publish these things. So the next thing you might be thinking, since we're doing our own chain, we're doing Pulse Chain, what if the miners do it? Because then, you know, you don't really have any trust beyond what you already have to trust the miners to do. So let's say you add some code to the node so that the miner, as part of minting their block, has to publish that block information to the other chain. Or, additionally, they have to publish ETH data to the Pulse chain. So they also are required to run an ETH node and then capture that and then publish it to the Pulse chain. There's still a few problems. So what if that miner is no good? What if they are falsifying data on Pulse chain? They're authorized to validate blocks because they have the correct stake, but stake can be slashed if you're a bad actor. And bad actor could be an availability problem, but it could also be if you're noticed to be producing bad blocks for whatever reason. So there's not a well-defined protocol for atomically rolling that back, right? So you would need a way to roll back or fork out. Yeah, we always move forward, so it's forking out. I'm calling it rolling back because you have to kind of ignore that whole branch that's derived from the bad data that they wrote. And that's just on the Pulse chain side. How do you know that their transaction to write to ETH about the Pulse update, the block headers for Pulse, how do you know when that worked? You don't know. The transaction could sit in the mempool for 3 days. Or you would have to wait some indeterminate amount of time for that transaction to be accepted, and another validator in the future would have to notice, because they're pulling ETH state, like, oh, that transaction finally got written. And this is only going to get worse as time goes on, because for a couple of reasons, but just immediately you should notice that the block times are different. So every 5th validator is going to try to write a block, write the Pulse chain header to Ethereum. And then maybe 5 validators later, there have been 4 more or 5 more block headers in line, and they have to be written sequentially, right? So maybe you could come up with a scheme where you could bulk write like every 5th or every 100th, can sort of package up a chunk of headers and write them, so you get past that immediate impedance mismatch. But there's still the finalization time on that information on Ethereum, which pulse miners don't control. So you, excuse me, have to be resilient to these out of sync problems, and that would require its own entire protocol just to solve. So nothing like that exists. Having the validators write the Ethereum state also would need a protocol design, because you need to be able to handle forks and reorgs. Maybe you could designate some like only write finalized blocks, and I'm using that term loosely to mean statistically very unlikely to be forked out, where the pulse nodes sort of trail the ETH state by 100 blocks or 1,000 blocks, whatever their finalization number is. But you still need a protocol around that. And as such, that doesn't exist. So now you're still back to a trusted party. All the solutions that exist use trusted parties of one form or another. There have been papers written about this. This is it's a very difficult problem, and frankly, it's not that lucrative to solve if people are willing to eat trusted party. So there's very little incentive. As a community, we have that as a value. So it is important for us to solve, but it may not be that way out of the gate. The last thing I'll address, because I think where people's intuition goes, if they know a little bit about the space, is atomic cross swaps. Atomic cross swaps work. Trustless atomic cross swaps work. So isn't this like that, where one party is just a contract, and its part of the swap is minting these sort of hologram coins, and then its part of the swap in the other direction is that you annihilate those coins. That's noticed, and then the contract on the other side releases the real coins. Unfortunately, this model doesn't work because the scheme, when it's 2 people, is I lock coins with a password, and then I give the other person the encrypted password. They lock coins using that encrypted password, which is what I wrote to the blockchain also, is the encrypted password. And then when I go collect their coins, I provide the plain text password, which hashes or encrypts to the same encrypted password. It gives me the coins. Because that's on chain, now the other person has the plain text password. They go to my chain, they provide the plain text password because it had to be publicly disclosed. They get the coins. Doesn't that work? It works with 2 people, because 2 people or agents that can run clients and see both chains have access to the canonical data for both chains, so they can see what has been done in public themselves. Contracts, which is what we need to be trustless, you need a contract, you need code that executes in the context of a chain, does not have a client to the other chain. That's where we get back to, well, but it can consult a light client, an approver on its own chain, but then who supplies the data to the light client? And you're back to how do you solve that with a protocol, or you have a trusted party that can write that data to the light client. So the schemes that solve this are academic. Basically, you have essentially a third-party network. You can call it a blockchain, just because it's consensus and sort of permanently persist history, so you can go back and interrogate it and make sure this happened, that happened. So there are protocols around this, around building a third-party network that can see both chains and then have some internal consensus mechanism so that you're kind of always marching forward. Like if you set up a swap or one of these projections, that can be viewed by this third-party network, and then you have some parameters around the third-party network so that that is trustless and doesn't actually control coins, or it has a mechanism to cancel a transaction in a way that that the person with the keys, or sorry, the people with their own keys can sort of initiate it. If it doesn't happen fast enough, they can cancel it. Those things exist. The papers to implement those things exist. We haven't found an actual engineered implementation of those things. So that's a very long answer to a very short question of why admin keys. Hopefully this was helpful. It's like 21 minutes, so this may be the longest video that I've made as one of my short videos. I hope it helps. Comments, hit me up on Telegram, Rapid Proto Tripe, or just ask around any Hex or Pulse channel, and you'll find me. Feel free to DM me any questions. I don't always get back to people right away, but I always get back to people. All right. Yeah, I'll leave you with that.